quitting your job is not the solution to stress. What is the solution?
The solution is basically stress is something that we think just happens to us, but actually it is a biological reaction within the body.
83% of lawyers report feeling stressed regularly. I'm sure it's probably actually higher than that.
We sort of blame the external thing. If that's made me stressed, there's nothing I can do. There's always something you can do.
Stress does not cause accuracy or productivity. So how can we reduce the conflict?
It doesn't come from the job itself. It's because you've not supported your body through that. 90% of the communication is going from your gut to your brain, not from your brain to your gut. But you are 31% less productive when you're stressed.
Stress in law isn't just part of the job, it's built into the culture. Deadlines, client demands, billable hours. It's easy to believe that stress is something external, something that happens to you. But stress isn't just about the job, it's a biological response. This episode is part of a new mini-series on well-being in law. While the demands of the industry aren't changing overnight, lawyers have to rethink how they can navigate them. And no, this isn't just another meditate and take breaks kind of conversation. We know stress in law isn't that simple. The reality is most advice doesn't cut it, especially when you're dealing with constant pressure, high stakes, and a workload that just never stops. But there are ways to take back control, ways that actually work in the legal world. If you've ever thought, I need to know how to manage stress but nothing seems to help, then this is for you. Today, I'm sitting down with Grace Williams to get expert advice on how to manage stress in law. She's an ex-White and Case solicitor turned health and nutrition coach. So Grace, you say that quitting your job is not the solution to stress. What is the solution?
This is one of my favorite topics to talk about. The solution is basically to go inwards, because stress is something that we think just happens to us and that we have no control over it. But actually, when we think about stress, it is a biological reaction within the body. And why we react comes down to how we perceive a situation and what we believe about that and what we think about it. So take work or an email for it as an example. If you tell yourself that that's going to be something huge, stressful, it's going to take you a lot of time, the reaction that you have in your body is a lot more severe and a lot more detrimental to if you were like, oh yeah, that's just a sort of random email telling me I've got 50% off my next shop. The thing that's happened is the same. You've got an email, but your thoughts around it have completely changed how your body reacts to it. So the solution is not to think about the external, but it's thinking about how am I responding to that and what am I telling my body? Am I telling my body it's a threat? It's something that I need to run away from and get away from? Or am I telling my body it's okay and I'm going to get through this? And when we look at stress from that perspective, and when you then on top of like bring in the tools and resources, your support, you will completely change how stress manifests in the body, because ultimately we are built to be able to handle stressful situations. Is why we have a stress response, but you just need to make it work for you rather than against you. And I think that's the really key missing piece, because as I said, we sort of blame the external thing of like, that's made me stressed, there's nothing I can do. There's always something you can do. Yes, some situations are a lot more stressful than others. Some are hard to rationalize, but it's, are you giving yourself the support and the resources around that to make sure your body gets through it? And that's how you stop stress becoming distress in the body. It's ultimately, it's your body's reaction to it that's the detrimental, the sort of can be damaging part, not the event itself. So quitting your job, unfortunately, is not going to be the solution. I always use the example of, I was just as stressed working a Saturday job that was very relaxed, very lovely. I literally spoke with 80-year-old grandmas all day. It was lovely. They would give me book recommendations, but my stress levels and how sort of like high alert and on the go I felt all the time was exactly the same as when I then started in law. Two very, very different situations, but the exact same feelings, because ultimately my body was reacting in the same way. And so this is how we can sort of change your reaction to what's happening around you.
Very interesting. How do you go about then helping your body understand what is an actual threat and what's not? I guess rewiring your brain to understand that things like emails coming through or being asked to do certain tasks are not threats to your nervous system and you should deal with them and therefore in a different way.
It's a bit of a brain training exercise. And the thing with all of these things is the first step is the awareness piece. It's becoming aware and conscious of your thoughts around it. So this will be different for everyone. But if we say getting an email is the example, but for some people, they don't even think about that. But I have other clients who are terrified to open their emails. They'll leave it for 20 minutes, half an hour, because they're just like, I don't want to read what's in there yet. And all that's doing is building up the fear more and more and more. But what you want to do is first become aware of how you react to a situation. So stress can either be seen as a challenge in a positive way. So something that's like, right, I've got this. I'm going to really get through this. It's something quite fun, challenging, exciting. Use that in a positive way. Or we can see it as this big threat. As you say, the nervous system goes into, I'm running away from the tiger behind me, even though at the moment it is just an email. And so you bring that awareness in of how do you react in those situations. For me, a big one was I used to be asked to do research quite a lot. I was in a dispute seat, and it would put me in this absolute spiral of I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm never going to find the answer. How am I going to find the right cases? And I'd catastrophize. I would think about the worst outcome, tell myself I wasn't going to be able to do it. And I start blaming myself for not knowing the legal answer before I'd been set the research, as though I was supposed to have done all of this reading beforehand and known the exact question that I was going to be asked that day and have done it all before. Whereas actually, if I'd taken a step back, and that's the big thing, we need to create space between your reaction and then your action. So you can have the initial reaction, but before you act, you've got to think, okay, how am I going to do this? I never took that space. I went straight into this spiral that just kept on spiraling. And I would get more and more worked up about it, more and more worked up. Ultimately, I would find the answer and I would hand the research in and it would be fine. You'd get it done in time, all of those things. But how I felt doing it was not fun, I think is the only word I could describe it. And the stress on my body was so intense. And so it's, first of all, as I said, that awareness piece. And then you create the space. So when you get that email, when you get asked to do a task, notice how you react and then take a second to pause. And I'm not saying go somewhere for 10 minutes and ignore it. It's actually just like breathe and be like, okay, what is the rational view of this? What is on paper? What am I being asked to do? And then you bring in stress shields. So these are statements, these are things that you can tell yourself that you're just like, I got this and I know I can do this. The biggest one, I think, in the sort of law context is always going to be, you've probably done it before. The subject can be different, the context can be slightly different, but there's a very high chance that you have done that task before, you've done the email, whatever the email is asking for, you have done, or someone around you has done it. So you have the proof that it's possible. So it's bringing in those statements to tell yourself, actually, I've got this, I can do this. And you're then rewiring your brain to look for possibilities and solutions as opposed to catastrophizing and going down the route of like, stress is the biggest threat to my performance. And by doing that, you're rewiring how your brain is working there. And with that, you're also rewiring how stress is manifesting in the body. There was an incredible study that took pairs of individuals. So one person would have seen stress as this like big threat, one saw it as a challenge, and they subjected them to the same stressor and monitored their stress response, both from a physiological level, but also their recovery, all of these things. And the people that saw stress as a positive, so something that was a really good challenge that they could rise to, it manifested in their body in a completely different way to those that saw it as a threat and in a more positive way. So not only did they recover faster, but they also had more cardiac output, which basically just means more oxygen was being pumped to their brain, which is conducive and supportive to decision making, to thinking clearly, to getting the job done, to doing the task, versus the people that, yes, still a stress response, but the people that saw it negatively, it took them a long time to recover. And actually, the way that their blood pressure increased was just by their blood vessels constricting, which is what leads to increased risk of cardiovascular disease, all of those negative impacts on the body. So this sort of mind perception of stress is such a powerful piece that doesn't just come from how you then ultimately do the task, but it also affects what's happening within your body. And when we talk about that bigger piece of just longevity and keeping up your performance, you want to be as healthy as possible while you're doing the job, and changing how you see stress, changing what you think about a task. Our thoughts create our reality. And I know that that can sound quite strange in a lot of situations, but if you think very negatively about something that you've got to do, your experience is going to be negative as well. And it's bringing all of these things together to realize, actually, I know this is how I usually react. I'm going to try something different. I'm actually going to tell myself I can do it and see what happens. You're then using stress as a tool and using it to sort of fuel you, give you that energy, give you that drive to get something done, rather than freezing and going into like, oh my gosh, panic. And yes, you can still get it done when you're in that panic, but why do we want to feel like that? It's the worst feeling when you're like, oh my God, thoughts spiraling, all of those things. You want to feel very different while doing it. And that is, it's the smallest shift, the awareness, the pause, and then the stress shields, and you'll feel completely different while you're doing something.
When I look at the legal industry, for me, it's such a contradictory industry in the sense that it's such a high accountability industry in which the decisions that you make massively impact your clients and the firm, yet it's such a high stress industry. So the two are just not really compatible. I looked at some studies before speaking to you just to see what the statistics are saying. And I read that 83% of lawyers report feeling stressed regularly. I'm sure it's probably actually higher than that, to be honest. And 15% of solicitors work more than 60 hours per week. Again, it's probably much higher than that in reality. It's in the best interest for law firms to have your staff to be not stressed, not freaking out over receiving a simple email, which I know that feeling, you know. I'm the type of person who will see an email and will ignore it for hours, if not days, because I'm like, I don't even want to open it because it looks too scary, you know. And I've heard other senior lawyers even tell me the same thing. Like they just see the title and they're like, I can't open that. I can't open it. So even from that is causing such stress in people. Yet the industry, it's so important for lawyers to do a good job and to be accurate in their work as well. Yet stress does not cause accuracy or productivity. So how can we, I guess, reduce the conflict between all of these things?
I really love this question because it's so true. And I always used to think, when it's like you're up at 2 a.m. doing something, it would always be proofreading, something that you have to be so precise and specific over. Yet you are the least switched on. Technically, you probably feel very switched on at the moment, but like it's not the most productive time to be doing that. But that's the task that you've been asked to do. And a statistic I love is that you are 31% less productive when you're stressed. So the drop in your productivity is so huge when we're stressed. And what's happening is your prefrontal cortex, which is basically the thing that's responsible for your rational thoughts, is weakened. And your amygdala, which is your emotional responsive, becomes hyperactive when we're stressed. And so what's happening is our rational thoughts are being taken over by our emotional thoughts, which makes us more reactive and sort of we're not making those clear decisions and all of those things that you really want to be making, as you say, not just for yourself, but for your clients, be it work output, all of those things. So a big thing is all around how are you feeding your brain? Ultimately, all of these decisions, all of the support that we're coming down to, like that comes down to our brain and how our brain is functioning. If we are supporting our brain both through what we're eating, how we're living, how we're structuring our days, you are going to be supporting your body through those things so that you can then perform better. This is not about changing the tasks that you're doing, it's changing how you feel while doing them. And the brain's incredible. It's 2% of our body weight, yet it uses 20 to 30% of our intake of calories every single day. So it's such a small part of the body, yet we just kind of disregard it. We think food is just not important. But actually, what you're eating is going to support both your stress response and also how productive you are in your decision making, because those are the things that are so important. When we are stressed, we burn through our resources so quickly. And when you think about sort of longevity in the career, things like burnout, that comes from you running out of resources. It doesn't come from the job itself. It's because you've not supported your body through that. So we just need to bring that support back in, and a really great place and the easiest place is through food, because it doesn't even have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be that you now need to go on some crazy, actually the opposite of what you should be doing is going on some crazy juice cleanse or cutting out a load of foods. It's what can you add? What are the simple ingredients, the simple things that you can do, add to your plate, whether you're getting lunch out, whether you are making it yourself, whatever you're doing, to give your brain the nourishment and support. And when clients start doing this, they go from second guessing every decision to feeling fatigued to just not knowing what to do outside of work. They've got their decisions at work are 100%, but outside of that, they're feeling very stuck. They're feeling they don't have the motivation. Their focus might be dropping, all of those things. But when you bring in the nourishment and the support, the decision making completely switches. Suddenly they're thinking so much more clearly. They can focus more. They're productive again. And this just comes down to small switches. And it's things like, are you getting enough protein? Are you including anti-inflammatory foods in your diet? And I think there's so much sort of talk and speak around these things of like, oh yeah, I need to eat more protein, anti-inflammatory. We all know that that's a good thing. But until you know the why behind it, you have no motivation to do it. And the biggest why is it's going to change how you perform at work for the better. It's going to support you through that. So yeah, it's things like getting enough protein. The simplest way for anti-inflammatories is, can you add olive oil to your food? Add a tablespoon of olive oil to what you're eating, packed full of anti-inflammatory ingredients, and you've not done anything. I always had a bottle on my desk. I would drizzle over it over any food, and you then just know you've given yourself so many nutrients that you can then absorb all of these things. And we've also got to think about the gut-brain connection, because when we think about productivity and focus, we almost see our body as very separate to the work that we're doing. We're like, yep, I have my health, this is on one side, and then I have my work. But actually, your work can't get to the levels that you want it to if your body is not functioning at its best. And our gut, unfortunately, plays a huge part in that, because it's so connected to the brain, both physically and chemically. And 90% of the communication is going from your gut to your brain, not from your brain to your gut. So the messages that your body is telling your brain are so strong. And if that is unhappy, then that feeds a sort of negative cycle. So if we're then thinking that you're adding in the negative thoughts of like, oh, I can't do this, I'm too stressed, I don't have enough time, that negative feedback isn't just coming from your brain, it's also coming from your gut, which, if that's unhappy, is this sort of negative cycle. So feeding both is so important. And then it's thinking about, how are you structuring your day, in the sense of, do you have time for yourself? Which someone is going to listen to and be like, well, of course I don't, and I'm never going to. Time for yourself can be 2 minutes, it can be 5 minutes, it doesn't have to be hours on end. But these are really important things that you want to bring in, because when you know that you are prioritizing yourself, when you have the confidence around that and the trust around that, you will completely transform how you feel when you are doing your work. You can be set something that you know is going to take you hours, and you know it's going to be a late night. But if you know at the same time that you still got 5 minutes to get outside this morning, or you made the lunch that you wanted to eat, or you've put some olive oil on your lunch, or just like, I've done something for me today, it gets you through those really busy, stressful times in a way that just gives you the confidence and the trust that you can do this. And that's such a big piece when we go back to that sort of the positive statements that sort of get you through stress. These are some of them to support you through that. You're like, I know I've done that for myself, so I can deal with this. And it's all sort of rewiring those thought patterns through both your food and also how you approach your day to just really support that.
I think it's so interesting what you say about the gut and the brain. I'm not aware of this.
Mm.
In talking about that, or touching on that point, what would you say to lawyers who want to focus on this gut brain connection to improve their brain health, I guess, or physical health? What would you say are the top tips that they can do, like now or today, that will help that?
Try and limit to 3, because I think that's like an easy place to start. The first one and the biggest one I will always say is, go stand outside in natural light. Again, this doesn't have to be for a long time, but the more touch points of natural light that you can get throughout the day, the better, because natural light is what regulates your circadian rhythm, so your sleep wake cycle. And that also regulates how, when your cortisol switches off and when your serotonin turns on. So cortisol is your stress hormone. And we need cortisol. It's what wakes us up in the morning. Again, it gives us that drive, all of those things. But the thing that turns it off, what we want to do is, you get this big spike, and then it dips throughout the day so that you can basically, you're awake, and then sort of it slowly dips off until it hits its lowest in the evening, which is obviously when we want to be going to sleep. And what's then happening is serotonin, which is your happy hormone, is taking over. But that switch between the two only happens when we get natural light, because serotonin will only switch on in natural light. And the problem is we are waking up in the morning, we're checking our phones, we're then getting dressed, jumping on the tube, getting into the office. Yes, you might be outside for 2 minutes, but the ideal is 20 minutes of natural light in the morning. That ideal is never really a reality for a lot of us. That's actually too long. We can't do that. But as much as possible, can you increase it to get to that 20 minutes? It can even be things like, can you get ready by a window? If you're doing some work in the morning, can you do it by a window? A cardboard box on a windowsill? It can be as makeshift as you like it to be, but getting that natural light is going to completely switch off the sort of cortisol and then turn on the happy hormone, which will then in turn, serotonin, 95% of that is made in the gut, 90 to 95%. So we want to be sort of bringing these systems together through a very powerful tool, which is just natural light. If you can then get outside at lunchtime for 10 minutes, and when I say this to some clients, they're like, but I don't have time. We then delve into what their day looks like and what it consists of. And the reason why they're telling themselves they don't have time is that it doesn't feel legitimate. So going upstairs to the office sort of canteen to get a coffee, bumping into someone, it could be a partner or it could be a trainee, bumping into them, having a conversation for 10 minutes, they have no worries about that. That wouldn't scare them. They wouldn't get upset. They wouldn't be like, oh gosh, I've been away from my desk for so long. No fears come in. But the thought of stepping, not because it's outside the office, but it's that you're doing something for yourself versus something that's legitimate to happen in the day. So I always want to challenge people's perception of that, of, but why isn't that legitimate? Because you getting natural light and you getting outside at lunchtime, boosting your productivity, boosting your focus, looking after your gut health, that then is the most conducive thing you can do to your work, which is ultimately the thing that matters when you're at work. So it's changing what you believe is legitimate. So always bring that out when it comes to people being like, I don't have time. It's like, you will find the time. If you know that this is possibly one of the most productive things you can do in the day, you will find the time. And it, as I said, it can be 5 minutes. Just go downstairs, get a boost of that light, and then go back up to your desk and you'll feel so different. Same if you're in a creativity rut, that's a really good one as well. From a sort of then a food perspective, one of my most favorite ingredients I recommend to everyone is cacao. So basically very, very dark chocolate. But that's because cacao has 40 times more antioxidants than blueberries, and it's one of the highest plant sources of magnesium. And magnesium is used in hundreds of processes throughout the body, but when it comes to stress, we burn through it so quickly. So we really want to be replenishing those stores as much as possible. It's used in our energy production, but it's also used as a relaxation, so to help us sleep. So the more of that we can get into our diet, the better. And cacao is an incredible source. It's an excuse to have a hot chocolate. So there's nothing better. But obviously the darker the chocolate, the better. But if you can have that at your desk, I have one in the morning. If you know it's going to be a really late night, I always say switch to having a cacao over having coffee. So you can use the powder to make, as I said, like a hot chocolate. And having that sort of post 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., whenever it is that you're like, I need energy to get me through until whatever time it's going to be, switch to cacao, because not only is it's a gentle stimulant, but you're not spiking your blood sugar, you're not doing sort of damaging the effects of melatonin, all of these things that we really want to be supporting, which you can just do through this one food. And it is feeding your gut bugs incredibly. Like it's full of fiber as well. All of these benefits that are then feeding the good gut bacteria. So natural light, cacao, olive oil, I already said, so definitely having olive oil on your desk, such an easy way. And thinking about protein, because ultimately protein is broken down into amino acids, which is just the building blocks for your body. It's not just muscle, it's not just sort of going to the gym, all of those types of things. Protein, we burn through it very quickly as well when we're stressed, but it's also what makes our neurotransmitters. So things like serotonin, which I said was your happy hormone, acetylcholine, which really plays a big role in our stress response. We want to be supporting the production of those. And the biggest way and the easiest way to do that is through getting protein into our diets. So it's sometimes looking at your plate and being like, actually, do I have any protein on here? Quite often when we're picking up a lunch or sort of picking it up, say from Pret or from somewhere around the corner, the protein content is very low. So what can you add to your plate to just boost that more? And the energy and the focus that you will feel from that will completely transform everything. And you're then also really supporting your gut lining, which again, it's this whole cycle. Stress, gut health, and energy are this big cycle that is all very, very linked. And that can sound daunting in the sense of like, oh God, like I've got no hope. But actually, the great thing is, if you're looking after your stress, you're looking after your gut health, which is going to be supporting your energy. Same way as if you're focusing on your gut health, you're going to be looking at the other two as well. They're so linked that sort of all of these tips go to all three. So it's hard to sort of draw out and be like, oh, well, this is only doing this. And we're so one track focused on like, oh, I'm just looking up my gut health, the only thing I'm suffering with. If we take a step back, there's going to be a bigger picture. So what can we do? What are the small things that are going to address all three of those? And yeah, I think I've now said four, but yeah, hopefully not too overwhelming. But natural light, cacao, olive oil, and protein, I think would be the best ones.
Got a bonus one in there.
Yeah.
That's so helpful. I didn't know about the cacao, but also the light is an interesting one because I knew that natural light was important, but I didn't realize the actual massive significance, which is what you're explaining, of how important it is. And I spent years, not seeing any natural light really, because especially when you're working in England in the winter and you go to work before the sun rises and you leave after the sun has gone down. So it's pretty much dark the whole time. So, like getting light, you have to make a conscious effort, really, don't you?
You do. And if that's a struggle, I really recommend the sad lamps, which I know they're so bright and really uncomfortable sometimes to have right by you, but the difference they make is huge. And if you know you can't get outside, there will always be those days when you can't do that. If you have that on next to you, you're basically getting the benefits. So sunlight, the way that light is measured is in lux, and sunlight is 100,000 lux. A cloudy day is around 10,000. Those sad lamps are mimicking a cloudy day. They're also around 10,000. And people will then say, well, I'm in the artificial lights. Like they're so bright, that must be doing the same thing. But artificial lights are only around 1,000 lux. So if we take the difference between 1,000 and 10,000, and then even 100,000 if you're thinking sunlight, it's such a huge drop. So just having that sad lamp there for 20 minutes in the morning, it can be when you're at home while you're getting ready, it can be have it in the office, wherever it's going to be easiest for you. And it then does take a level of pressure off if you know that actually getting up from your desk, even if you don't remember, I'd set a reminder on your phone, but if you don't remember, then this is a way that you can do it and sort of bring it in different ways. Same as the sunrise alarm clocks, they can be a great way to get it in as well, because yes, unfortunately, the time of year is not conducive to even wanting to stand outside when today it's currently pouring with rain and freezing cold. So it's harder. So I am a health and nutrition coach, and I work with clients to redefine what high performance means and looks like for them through both nutrition and lifestyle changes. And this is really about bridging the gap between your health and your career so that you can keep your output and your performance at that level that you really want it to be, but feel completely different while you're doing it. This is something that massively comes from my own personal journey. So I actually started my career as a solicitor. I was at White & Case for 6 years, trained and qualified there. And while I was there, I went through experiences with burnout and grief. So for 3 years of those 6, which is slightly terrifying to say, I was a full-time carer to my parents. They both went through cancer diagnoses at the same time. So when I say I understand what being under a lot of pressure, what finding balance, what all of those things mean, I really do mean it. And it's now very much about taking all of those strategies and those personal experiences to the work I do now to really just transform how someone feels while they're doing the job that they love. And it completely changes how you feel and show up every single day. I'm also very fortunate to work with law firms, whether that's with employees or with the firms themselves, to bring these conversations to the companies, because I think they are just topics that need to be spoken more about and can really change the experience for people within the firm that you're working at. So I really love that piece as well. I still get my connection to a career that I really did love, and so I don't feel like I've lost any of that, which is heaven. But yes, you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Grace Williams. I'm sure we'll be linking it, but yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best place to find me.